Okay, have you ever felt like you're hitting this invisible ceiling?
Mm.
You know? Like you're capable of so much more, but something's holding you back.
It's like an outdated self-image is getting in the way.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we are going to dive into today.
Awesome.
You shared this episode of the Liv Aware podcast called The Psychology of Identity, how who you think you are is holding you back. And
Oh,
now,
that sounds interesting.
yeah, so get ready because this one is all about breaking free from limitations.
I love it.
So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
What do you think? What stood out to you from this episode?
Well, I think it's fascinating how much power our self-perception really has.
Yeah.
The podcast host even uses this great metaphor, and he says, it's like we're trapped in an identity cage built from old labels and experiences, and I think back to our childhoods, we were probably told we were shy or not good at math.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And those labels kind of stick with us even when they no longer reflect who we are.
Right? It's like those early experiences write the first draft of our identity story.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I find really intriguing is this idea from the podcast that we can rewrite that story.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so tell me more.
Well, the podcast delves into this whole science of neuroplasticity, which essentially means our brains are constantly rewiring themselves.
Really?
Yeah, so every time we learn something new or overcome a fear or develop a new habit, we're literally changing the physical structure of our brains.
Whoa, that's pretty mind-blowing. So that means like if our brains are always changing, our identities are not fixed either.
Precisely. Our brains don't always distinguish between our self-perception and objective reality. And the podcast gives some really interesting examples of how this plays out in business and even romantic relationships.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
Okay, well, let's say you believe that you're bad at business, even if you have the skills.
Okay.
That belief can unconsciously influence your behavior and can even lead you to make decisions that will sabotage your success.
Ah, so it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
Our beliefs shape our actions, and our actions reinforce our beliefs.
Yeah, and the same goes for romantic relationships.
Oh, really?
If you believe you're unworthy of love, you might unconsciously push people away even if they're genuinely interested in you.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like our internal beliefs create this filter through which we experience the world. So if we want to change our experiences, we have to start by changing the filter.
Exactly. And that's the empowering part.
Okay.
The podcast really emphasizes that we are not victims of our past.
Okay.
We have the power to choose a different story,
I like that.
to rewrite the narrative of who we are.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, the podcast outlines a 3-step method that's worth exploring, and it starts with recognizing those outdated labels and self-statements that are holding you back. It's like taking inventory of your identity cage. What are the beliefs that no longer serve you? Maybe it's, I'm not good at public speaking, or I'm always the one who gets left behind.
Yeah, I think we all have those voices in our heads, those negative self-talk tapes that play on repeat.
Yeah.
So how do we silence those tapes?
Well, it's about challenging those beliefs.
Okay.
Ask yourself, is this really true? What evidence do I have to support this belief? And if you can't find any solid evidence, it might be time to let that belief go.
Okay, so step one is awareness.
Yes.
Bringing those limiting beliefs to the surface and questioning their validity. What's next?
Step 2 is about using what the podcast calls identity expansion techniques.
Ooh, I like that.
These are practical tools to start shifting your self-perception.
Okay, give me the tools.
All right. One that I found particularly helpful is the as-if principle.
Oh, yeah.
And it's basically acting as if you're already the person you want to be.
Okay.
So you want to be more confident. Start making decisions. Carrying yourself, interacting with others as a confident person would.
Oh, so that's like fake it till you make it.
Yeah, there's some truth to that, but it's more nuanced than simply pretending. It's about stepping into the role, embodying the qualities you desire, even if you don't feel them fully yet. And what's amazing is that as you act as if, your brain starts to catch up.
Oh, wow.
You start to internalize those new behaviors and beliefs.
That's like giving your brain a taste of the new identity you're creating, and over time it starts to believe it.
Exactly. It's about rewiring those neural pathways and creating new associations.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Are there other techniques that work in a similar way?
Yeah. Another powerful technique is future self-visualization.
Okay.
And this one involves vividly imagining yourself a year from now having already achieved the goals you're working towards.
Okay.
How does that future, you think, act and feel? What kind of life are they living? By spending time with that vision, you start to internalize it and make it feel more real.
It's like creating a blueprint for your future self.
That's a great way to put it. And the more detailed and vivid your vision, the more powerful the impact.
Okay, so we've got the as-if principle and future self-visualization.
Yeah.
Any other tools in this identity rewriting toolkit?
Well, the podcast also talks about using affirmations.
Oh, yeah.
But not just any affirmations.
Yes.
It emphasizes using affirmations that are based on evidence.
So instead of just saying, I am confident,
Yeah.
you might say, I am resilient because I've already overcome this specific challenge that I faced.
Precisely. It's about anchoring your affirmations in real experiences, which makes them much more powerful and believable to your subconscious mind.
Okay, so we've got step 1, recognizing those outdated labels, step 2. Using identity expansion techniques to start shifting our self-perception. But what about actually making those changes stick, like really rewiring our brains at a deeper level?
That's where that third step comes in, reprogramming your subconscious through new experiences.
Okay.
And the podcast calls this seeking out disconfirming experiences, which essentially means putting yourself in situations that challenge your old identity.
Oh, so if you believe you're bad at public speaking, you might sign up for a small speaking event,
Yeah.
even if it feels scary.
Exactly. It's about facing your fears and proving to yourself that your old limitations aren't actually real.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be anything drastic.
Yeah.
The podcast emphasizes the power of micro shifts, making small daily changes that gradually add up over time. So instead of trying to overhaul your entire identity in one, go focus on taking small steps that move you in the right direction.
That makes a lot of sense.
Oh,
It's less overwhelming and more sustainable than trying to change everything overnight.
precisely. It's about showing your brain through consistent action that you're evolving and becoming the person you want to be.
So it all seems to come down to taking ownership of the story we're telling ourselves.
Exactly. It's about realizing that we're not passive characters in our own lives.
Right.
We have the power to rewrite the narrative to become the authors of our own identities.
I love that. Are there real-life examples of people who have actually done this, who have successfully rewritten their identity stories?
Yeah, the podcast actually highlights some pretty inspiring examples.
Okay, like who?
Well, Oprah Winfrey, for instance, was told she wasn't fit for television.
What?
Yeah, but went on to become one of the most influential media figures of all time.
Wow, that's incredible. She definitely rewrote her story in a big way. Any other examples?
Well, Albert Einstein was labeled as slow as a child,
Really?
which clearly didn't stop him from reshaping our understanding of physics.
Wow.
And then there's J.K. Rowling, who went from being a struggling single mother to one of the most successful authors in the world.
That's amazing.
These individuals didn't just change their skills or circumstances, they changed their identities. They started to see themselves as capable, worthy, and constantly evolving.
I think their stories are so inspiring because they highlight a really important point. Change is possible for anyone. If they can rewrite their stories, so can we.
Absolutely. It's about believing in our own capacity for transformation and then taking consistent action to make it happen.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the illusion of a fixed identity, the science behind identity fluidity, the practical steps for breaking free from outdated labels, and even some inspiring examples of people who've done just that. Before we move on, are there any key takeaways you'd like to highlight?
I think the most important takeaway is that your identity is not a fixed fact. It's a story you tell yourself, and you have the power to change the narrative. You're not stuck with who you used to be. Growth starts when we stop identifying with our past selves and embrace the possibility of becoming someone new, someone even better.
I love that. It's about recognizing our own power to shake our identities and create the lives we want.
Exactly. And that's a really empowering message, especially if you're feeling stuck or limited by your current self-image.
Okay, that's a fantastic point to end this part of our deep dive on. But when we come back, we'll be diving even deeper into this fascinating topic of identity transformation. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. You know, we've been unpacking this idea that our identities were more fluid than we think, and I'm really curious to hear what's resonating with you so far.
You know, it's funny you should ask that. As we were talking about those outdated labels and limiting beliefs, I was thinking about how much we focus on fixing what we perceive as wrong with ourselves.
Yeah,
But what about the positive aspects of our identity?
right.
Do those need to be rewritten too?
That's such a great question, and it points to a really important nuance. Rewriting your identity isn't about erasing or rejecting everything about who you are.
Okay.
There might be parts of your self-image that are positive and serve you well.
Right. Like if someone sees themselves as a kind and compassionate person, That's a good thing. We wouldn't want to throw that out.
Exactly. Those positive qualities can be real strengths, but even with positive traits, it's worth checking in to make sure they're not holding us back in some way.
I'm not sure I follow. Can you give an example?
Sure, imagine someone who identifies strongly as a helper and always puts others' needs before their own. While that's a beautiful quality, it could become problematic if it leads to resentment or burnout.
Ah, I see. So even positive identities can become limiting if they're not flexible and adaptable.
Precisely. It's about making sure all aspects of our self-image are aligned with our values, goals, and aspirations. And that requires ongoing reflection and self-awareness.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like a constant process of checking in with ourselves and making sure our identities are working for us, not against us.
Exactly. Now, the podcast left listeners with this thought-provoking question, who am I becoming? And it made me realize how much we often focus on who we want to be in the future. But it's equally important to pay attention to who we're becoming in the present moment.
Right.
Every choice we make, every action we take is shaping our identity in real time.
It's like we're constantly writing our story, whether we're aware of it or not.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to be intentional about the choices we make.
Yeah.
We have the power to shape the narrative, but it takes conscious effort.
So it's not enough to just dream about who we want to be. We have to actively live that identity.
Exactly. It's about bridging the gap between our desired self and our actual self. And remember, we have all those tools we talked about earlier to help us on this journey. The as-if principle, future self-visualization, seeking out disconfirming experiences.
It's like we have this incredible toolkit at our disposal, but it's up to us to actually use it.
I love that. And one of the most empowering aspects of this whole concept is that it shifts us from feeling like passive passengers in our own lives to being the ones behind the wheel.
Yeah.
We have the power to choose our destination and the route we take to get there.
And speaking of routes, I'd love to loop back to something we touched on earlier. The importance of being mindful of our positive identities as well. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of fixing what we perceive as wrong with ourselves.
Yeah.
But it's equally important to celebrate and cultivate our strengths.
Absolutely. It's about having a balanced perspective.
Mm.
We need to acknowledge our areas for growth, but also appreciate and nurture the qualities that make us unique and valuable.
It's like tending a garden. We need to pull out the weeds, but also make sure we're watering the flowers.
I love that analogy. It captures the essence of this ongoing process of self-cultivation.
If our identity is truly a story we tell ourselves, what kind of story do we want to tell going forward? What kind of protagonist do we want to be in our own life narrative?
That's such a powerful question. It challenges us to step into the role of the author, to craft a story filled with purpose, meaning, and growth.
And remember, we have the pen in our hands. We have the power to rewrite the story and create a narrative that reflects the best version of ourselves.
Beautifully said. That's a perfect note to end on for this part of our discussion. We've explored the complexities of identity, the science behind its fluidity, and the empowering tools we have to shape it.
And exploring how to integrate them into our daily lives. It's incredible how much power we actually have to shape who we are, even as adults.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this whole concept of rewriting your identity so exciting. It's not just some abstract theory, something we can actually put into practice.
That's what I keep coming back to. We've explored the science behind identity, the idea that it's a story we can rewrite, but how do we actually bring this to life day by day? Like, what are those practical steps to make these changes last?
Remember the as-if principle.
Yeah.
It's such a simple yet powerful tool.
Yet the idea of acting as if you already embody the traits you want to develop. It's almost like a cheat code.
It's amazing how effective it can be.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you want to be more confident, start making decisions as a confident person would. Project that confidence in your posture, in your voice, your interactions.
It's like giving your brain a dress rehearsal for the new you. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
Exactly. Your brain starts to believe the act, and eventually it becomes less of an act and more of who you are.
That brings us to another technique we touched on, future self-visualization. I love this one because it taps into the power of imagination.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that.
It's such a powerful tool for rewiring your subconscious. Create a vivid mental picture of yourself a year from now, by having achieved your goals, embodying the qualities you desire. How does that future you feel, how do they move through the world?
It's like setting a destination in your mind's GPS. And the more you revisit that vision, the more your brain starts charting a course to get there.
Exactly. It primes your subconscious to make choices that align with that future you.
Okay, so we've got acting as if and future self-visualization. What else can we do to solidify these changes, to really rewrite the script at a deep level?
Well, remember, the podcast emphasized the importance of aligning our actions with our aspirations, and that's where disconfirming experiences come in.
Okay.
It's about actively seeking out situations that challenge our old beliefs and limitations.
So if you believe you're bad at public speaking, you might purposely put yourself in situations where you have to speak up, even if it feels uncomfortable.
Precisely. It's about proving to yourself that your old limitations are not actually real. Each time you step outside your comfort zone and succeed, you chip away at those old beliefs.
It's like a real-world test of your new identity.
Yes.
And as you pass those tests, your confidence grows.
Exactly. And remember, it doesn't have to be anything drastic.
Right.
Start small. Maybe it's joining a Toastmasters group, or even just speaking up more in meetings.
I love that it's about taking those small steps, those micro shifts that add up to big changes over time.
Absolutely. And speaking of our environment, don't forget the influence of our social circles.
Oh, yeah.
The people we surround ourselves with can either support our growth or hold us back.
That's so true. If we're constantly around people who reinforce our old stories, it's going to be so much harder to rewrite the script.
Right, and it might be time to take stock of your relationships. Are the people in your life cheering you on, or are they subtly undermining your efforts?
Right.
It doesn't mean you have to cut people out of your life, but it might mean being more mindful of the energy you allow into your space.
That's such an important reminder. Surround yourself with people who inspire you, who believe in your potential, and who encourage you to become the best version of yourself.
Exactly. It's like creating a support system for your transformation.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm struck by how empowering this whole concept is. You know, it's like we've been handed the keys to our own identity, and we have the power to decide who we want to be.
Yes, it's about reclaiming authorship of your story. You're not defined by your past, by the labels you've been given, or the limitations you've believed in.
You're the author of your life.
Yeah.
And you have the pen in your hand.
Yeah.
Use it to write a story filled with purpose, meaning, and growth. A story that reflects your highest potential, your deepest values, and your most authentic self.
Beautifully said, and remember, this is an ongoing journey. Embrace the process, celebrate your progress, and never stop writing your story.
And on that inspiring note, we come to the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of identity. We hope you found this exploration as insightful and empowering as we have.
Thanks for joining us.